Hey, happy St. Patrick's Day and welcome to the Law Office of Brigid Duffield Kitchen. Today we're going to make Irish soda bread, and for many of you, you know that every year we send out our Irish soda bread recipe, our traditions, and a blessing for St. Patrick's Day. So rather than send it to you in writing, which we're still going to do, today we're actually going to show you how to make award-winning Irish soda bread. Now for many of you, when you hear the word soda bread, you go, ah, it's dry, it's got caraway seeds in it, I don't like soda bread. And you know what? That was my reaction too. And over the years, I have developed a soda bread recipe which I think your family is going to love. It's really fun and so easy to make. So come on into my kitchen and let's make soda bread today. So I've pre-measured everything so that it will be a little bit easier for us to get this going. So you start with 4 cups of flour. Sift it, don't sift it, it's really what is your preference. I'd like to sift flour. I like to sift it because sometimes there's little lumps in it. But mostly whatever you prefer. It does not matter. It's not going to affect the taste or the flavor of the soda bread. So to the 4 cups of flour, I add a cup of sugar. I also add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of baking powder. Now you might go, oh, why are you adding both baking powder and baking soda? Well, the chemicals in them react differently in certain recipes, and in this recipe, you actually need both. So use both baking powder and baking soda. Then I just give it a quick stir, just to mix it up a little bit, and then put everything on the side. Now here's where we get into rolling up our sleeves and getting some work done. So take 5 1/4 tablespoons of butter. Now before you do this next step, be sure you wash your hands. So I'm going to step away and just wash my hands for a minute because we're going to get down and dirty in this recipe. So when you take that butter and you put it into the flour, take a minute. I'm going to actually take off my watch as well. Take off any jewelry that you have and get in and move the flour and move it through the butter. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to knead the butter into the flour. Some people would do this if they're making a pie crust. It's exactly the same thing, but for soda bread, it gives the bread that extra boost of moisture and flavor that you don't get in other breads. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm a bread person. If you put a loaf of bread in front of me, I could sit down and eat the whole thing with a stick of butter. I love bread and butter. So for our recipe, once it's kneaded all the way through, and some people say it should be like pea-sized pieces of butter in here. I think it doesn't matter, it just takes a couple minutes, but just to make sure that all that butter is nice and in there. Then I just clap it off and wash my hands again. Now while I'm doing this, I want to tell you a couple things about bread. Bread is really pretty easy to make. People have bread makers, they do all sorts of things, and I don't make a lot of bread, but I do make a lot of soda bread. And so when you make bread, you want to make sure that you have a hot oven, because bread needs to cook all the way through and it needs to rise. So your oven needs to be hot when you make it. Now I'm going to put this aside and we're going to come back to that in just a couple minutes. Now the next step is, what are you going to put into your bread? I like raisins in my bread. It doesn't matter if you use black raisins, brown raisins, golden raisins, whatever kind of raisins you like is going to be fine. I actually buy the ones that are less expensive in the stores, and I tend to soak them in water overnight to give them a little extra boost and plump when it goes into the bread. So these raisins, 2 cups, have been soaked overnight in water, and I'm going to put them into a mixing bowl. Now the reason I put it into this measuring cup is really not for anything other than I'm going to add some other ingredients in here, and it's just easier to stir it when it's in this type of a bowl. So the next ingredients that we're going to add to our soda bread is an egg and buttermilk. Now, I don't know about you, but I hate buttermilk. Not a buttermilk fan, don't like to buy buttermilk, don't like to have buttermilk in my house, and when I buy it, I usually end up throwing it away after I use a little bit of it. But for soda bread, you need buttermilk. And in order to make buttermilk, it's very simple. I make a recipe that's just very easy to use. So you take 1 cup of milk. It can be whole milk, 2%, whatever kind of milk you have in your refrigerator, just 1 cup of milk, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And you just simply add it and let it sit for about a minute. It'll give the milk the tartness that it needs for the recipe, and it'll make the bread really nice and moist as you're making it. The next ingredient is an egg. Now I generally break the egg right into the raisins, but for you guys, I'm going to break the egg into a separate bowl because they say sometimes eggs are not always good. But this egg, as you can see, is great. So we're going to mix that egg up. We're just going to mix it up lightly. And I'm going to pour it on top of the raisins. Now I could pour the raisins and the egg directly into the batter, but I think it's easier if we combine the raisins and the egg and the milk and then add that all into the recipe. So I'm going to take my now made buttermilk and pour it on top of the raisins. And this is why I like this mixing bowl, because I can mix everything in here, easy peasy, and then throw this into my flour mixture. And believe it or not, we are almost done. Now we're going to take a spatula. Now, I'm a hands person. I generally would do this with my hands, but I've been advised for a video that using a spatula is probably more appropriate. But I don't know how much of this I can do with a spatula, so we're just going to do as much as we can, and then we're probably going to get in and do it with our hands. So give me a minute here to get this going. And you can see that this is a very fast recipe. I mean, you can make soda bread really, really quickly. And it's not an all-day project. And it's very, very easy. This is actually the hardest part of the whole recipe. Because now the dough, as the dough is thickening up here, it's like bread, and so you have to knead it. And that's what the next step is going to be. So we are going to, despite the other advice, we're going to knead this bread. So I'm just getting in here with my hands. You can see it can get a little messy. The flour can pop out. That's okay. There's plenty of flour. There's plenty of ingredients in here. And we are making a 9-inch cake pan size of a bread. So this is a pretty good size bread. You could make this in an 8-inch. You can make it in a 6-inch and split the recipe. But a 9-inch size is pretty good. I come from a family of 10, so everything that we make is big. And this is the perfect size for a family of 10, or if you're having a party and you're having friends over, you want to put a soda bread out, this is a perfect size for it. It looks like a cake, it tastes a little like a cake as opposed to bread, and it is really going to be the hit of your event. Now I will tell you, at some point, which might be now, we're going to finish this up and we're going to rewash our hands. But let me just make a couple last minute twists of this. Well, I guess I'll be changing before I go to work today. Oh, this is work. Anyway, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to put this into our pre-greased 9-inch cake pan. And as you can see, it's a little bit crumbly, which is good. Although it might be a little bit moister, you can put a little bit more milk in if you like your batter a little bit moister than this. But I tend to like it more on the level of a cup one, as opposed to more milk, but you can put in as much as you want. And I'm going to step aside and rinse my hands off for just a minute. Okay, and then I'm going to take out the rest of what's in this bowl here and just add it to the pan. And I'm going to set this bowl in the sink. Now, one of the things that is a secret recipe, or part of the secret of the success of this is, what do you do with the cake, or what do you do with the bread? Now, if you're used to traditional Irish soda bread, you know that some people make a St. Brigid's cross across the top of it. This bread, it's kind of hard to do that, so I just make sure that it's kind of even, but it's usually pretty bumpy. And it doesn't really matter because it's going to cook up around or the rounded top anyway. But if you feel like you want to cut a cross into there in honor of St. Brigid, try it. But it's been my experience with this particular soda bread that the cross won't hold. Then I take 2 tablespoons of melted butter and I pour that on top. And here's the trick to this cake, this soda bread, which will taste like cake and you're going to love it. is I then pour the butter over it and I kind of move it around a little bit, and then I take a couple of tablespoons, usually 3, of sugar, and I put the sugar all across the top. And the sugar will make a very sweet little crust that will just add a nice finishing touch to your soda bread. And I tap it around, and you can put more or less, there's no set measurement to that. And then you pop it in a oven preheated to 350 degrees. So I'm going to pop it in my oven over here and put it in for 350 degrees. Now I generally like to cook this for 45 minutes to 60 minutes. It's dense, and so you want to check it after a little bit of a time with a knife to make sure that it's cooked all the way through before you pull it out. But after about 45 or 60 minutes, depending on how your oven is working, I pull it out, and lo and behold, we have an award-winning Irish soda bread. So to you and your family, we send exceptional blessings for St. Patrick's Day and hope that you make the soda bread and enjoy it, and we wish you well. Slante!